Welcome to the Understanding the Dutch podcast series. In this video, we dive into the reasons and motivations behind learning Dutch. We cover the top 5 key points on why learn Dutch. 1. Improve communication. 2. Integration into Dutch society. 3. Cultural understanding and respect. 4. Tips for learning Dutch. 5. Challenges in practicing Dutch. These points highlight the practical reasons and strategies for learning Dutch, as well as some common challenges. So let's get started with this fascinating exploration of why learn Dutch.
Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into the world of Dutch? We've got this awesome YouTube video you sent in, and it's all about why people choose to learn Dutch.
It's set right in Nijmegen too, so we're getting authentic, on-the-street perspectives.
Yeah, real people, real reasons. Let's jump in.
You know, one thing that struck me was how many people talked about the social aspect of learning Dutch.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about, ordering food or asking directions.
Right. It goes way beyond those practicalities. It's about connecting with the Dutch people and their culture on a deeper level.
Makes sense. Language is about communication after all. And what better way to really communicate than in someone's native tongue?
Exactly. And the video really captures that sentiment. Like one person said, you can't truly grasp Dutch culture until you've mastered the art of conversation in someone's living room.
Huh. So true. It's like you need to know your Dutch living room vocabulary.
Right. And that actually ties into something else that came up about how Dutch social life is a bit different. People socialize more in homes than out and about, it seems.
So learning Dutch is like unlocking a whole new social scene then.
Kind of. You're not just a tourist anymore. You're part of the inner circle.
I love that. And it makes me think this whole idea of Dutch being a small language, which I know some people say, this video seems to challenge that.
Totally. Someone straight up says that Dutch isn't a small language, which got me thinking too, what even defines that?
Right, good point.
Well, they mentioned there are 24 million Dutch speakers globally.
Wow, I had no idea it was that many.
Yeah. More than all the Scandinavian languages combined, apparently. Plus, it's spoken in Suriname, parts of the Caribbean.
Oh, I forgot about that, yeah.
So it's got this whole reach that people don't always realize. There's a world of Dutch culture out there beyond just the Netherlands.
That's so cool. It's like this hidden gem or something, linguistically.
Right. And that actually connects to someone else's reason for learning Dutch. They wanted to understand their family history better.
Oh, that's sweet. It's like language as a link to the past.
Exactly. And speaking of connections, the video also highlights how learning Dutch can deepen your appreciation for Dutch culture overall.
Right, like language as a window into how a whole group of people sees the world.
Exactly.
It really is. It's like that saying, language is the key to understanding a culture's soul, right?
Exactly. And I feel like with the Netherlands in particular, learning Dutch gives you this insight into their values, humor, even just their general way of life. It's more than just words, you know?
Yeah, totally. It's like understanding how people think, not just what they're saying.
Exactly. One thing that really came through in the video was how many people brought up the Dutch emphasis on direct communication.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that. It's supposed to be super different from how some other cultures approach things, where it's more about being indirect or polite, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. And it can definitely take some getting used to if you're not used to it. But the video actually presented it as a positive thing, like a breath of fresh air. Yeah. They were saying how the Dutch value honesty and clarity, and they're not afraid to just say what they think, even if it comes off as a little blunt to others.
So it's less about being rude, more about being straightforward.
Right, exactly. Like just being efficient with their words. And apparently this isn't limited to just personal interactions either. It plays a big role in their work culture too, from what the video said.
Oh, that's fascinating. How so?
They were saying that in the Netherlands, meetings tend to be very goal-oriented. There's less emphasis on small talk or hierarchy and more focus on just getting things done.
Just less beating around the bush, more cutting to the chase.
Exactly. And for some people, especially if you're used to a work environment that's more formal, this can be really refreshing.
That makes sense. It's amazing how language can be such a unique window into a culture's values, even down to how they do business.
It is. And speaking of values, something else the video highlighted that I thought was really interesting was the whole Dutch approach to work-life balance.
Oh, yes. I've heard about that. It's all about gezelligheid. Right.
Yes. Gezelligheid. It's one of those words that doesn't have a direct translation in English.
Right, right.
But it's often described as this feeling of coziness, contentment, and connection with loved ones.
So, picture this. It's a rainy afternoon. You're in a cozy cafe, sipping hot chocolate with friends, or maybe it's a warm summer evening, you're having a barbecue with family in the backyard. That's Geselligkeit.
Exactly. It's that feeling of warmth, and connection.
I love that. It sounds like the Dutch have really figured out that whole work hard, play hard balance that so many people are striving for.
Right. They really do seem to have it down. And this emphasis on Geselligkeit, it goes beyond their personal lives, too. Like, they also really value spending time with colleagues outside of work.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like they understand that building those relationships beyond just the purely professional aspect is important.
It's about fostering a real sense of community.
Exactly. And that really resonated with me.
Yeah, it makes you think learning Dutch isn't just about acquiring a new language. It's almost like tapping into a whole new way of life.
You said it. It's about broadening your horizons, challenging your assumptions, and honestly, just discovering new ways to find joy and fulfillment in everyday life, which I love.
Me too. As we've been talking about all these different reasons to learn Dutch, it's clear it goes way deeper than, being able to order stroopwafels at a cafe.
Right.
It's about connecting with the people, the culture, on a much more meaningful level.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of connection, this whole idea of connecting on a deeper level reminded me of something else that stood out in the video. Apparently, the Dutch are generally very welcoming and encouraging towards people who are learning their language.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I bet that makes a huge difference. It can be kind of intimidating to put yourself out there and practice a new language, so knowing that people are receptive to your efforts must be really reassuring.
Absolutely. It creates a much more inclusive and welcoming environment for language learners, for sure.
Okay.
And, it actually ties back to that thing we were talking about earlier about direct communication.
Oh, how so?
Well, they were saying that if you stumble over your words or make a mistake, Dutch people are more likely to appreciate the effort and just, meet you halfway than to judge you for not being perfect.
That's awesome. It sounds like they really embrace the learning process, not just the end result.
Right. And that makes the whole experience more enjoyable and rewarding for everyone involved.
Totally. You've given us so much to think about. We've gone from those on-the-street perspectives in Nijmegen all the way to, the core of Dutch culture and values. But before we totally wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, those practical tips from the video. For anyone who's feeling inspired and wants to start their own Dutch language learning journey. Because, let's face it, getting started is sometimes the toughest part.
Oh, for sure. But it's like anything else, you got to break it down into smaller steps.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, this video had some really practical advice on that front.
Okay, so what's step one? Where do you even begin?
Well, one thing that kept coming up was this idea of immersion. Surrounding yourself with the language as much as you can. It's think of it like learning to swim, right?
You wouldn't just read a book about it. You'd want to get in the water.
Exactly.
Mm.
Maybe start in the shallow end, but you get the idea. The video talked about watching Dutch TV shows and movies, listening to music and podcasts in Dutch, even switching your phone settings to Dutch.
Oh, clever. I especially like that idea of watching shows and films with subtitles.
Yeah.
The fun way to start picking up vocabulary and getting used to how the language sounds without it feeling overwhelming.
Totally. And honestly, don't be afraid to start with things meant for kids. Often the language is simpler, the stories are universal. Plus, who doesn't love a good cartoon, right?
Exactly. It's a good reminder that learning a language doesn't have to be all serious. It can be fun, too.
For sure. And the more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to stick with it. Another thing they emphasized was active learning. So not just passively taking it all in, but really engaging with the language.
Okay, I like that. So what does that look like in practice?
Things like taking notes. When you come across a new word or phrase, write it down. Maybe even try using it in a sentence yourself.
Don't be afraid to mess up.
Exactly. Even native Dutch speakers had to start somewhere, right?
True.
Oh, and speaking of, they really encourage people to find opportunities for real-life conversations with native speakers.
I bet that's where the magic really happens. But also, probably the most intimidating part for a lot of people. Any tips on getting over that initial hurdle?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of language exchange platforms and apps online where you can connect with native Dutch speakers who are also learning your language. It's a great way to practice speaking and listening in a low-pressure environment.
Love that. Everyone wins. You're helping someone else while improving your own skills at the same time.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even make some new friends along the way. That's the thing about language. At its core, it's all about connecting with other people.
So true. Okay, so we've got immersion, active learning, finding conversation partners, Any other golden nuggets of wisdom from the video before we let our listeners go put all this into action?
You know, one last thing that really resonated with me was this idea that learning a language, it's not a destination, it's a journey.
Oh, that's such a good point. It's not about reaching some perfect level of fluency overnight. It's about the process of learning and growing.
Exactly. It's about being open to new experiences, new perspectives, and honestly, new ways of seeing the world.
Beautifully said. It's like you're not just learning a language, you're expanding your whole world in the process.
Precisely. So as you embark on your own Dutch language adventure, be patient with yourself, embrace those challenges, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Great advice. This whole deep dive has been so inspiring. We've gone from the streets of Nijmegen to, like, the heart of Dutch culture, picking up practical tips and cultural insights along the way. Even some pretty profound thoughts about language learning overall.
It's amazing what you can discover when you dive into a new language, right? Who knows, maybe someday you'll be the one sharing your own reasons for learning Dutch with the world.
That's a lovely thought. So to all our listeners out there, we leave you with this question. What will your Dutch journey reveal?